Okay, good evening, everyone. That's 7:30. Welcome to our virtual forum. I really wish I would be able to meet all of you in a in-person setting, hopefully sooner rather than later, but this is how we do this now. I'm Gina Picard, your new superintendent, and I want to say everyone's been so wonderful, a nice warm welcome. Everyone's been really thoughtful about the fact that we're dealing with COVID, but that's not a Chariho issue, that's a global issue, and so we're all in this together, learning how to do lots of things very differently. But I do know when this all hit in March, Jane Daly led that work with the great admins, teachers, and staff in Chariho, and lots of lessons learned, but lots of good work that happened, and we'll build from that. We're hoping that we continue to get better with our communication and updating you. We promise that you know what we know. We know that this has been very frustrating. We know that this decision isn't easy. Whether you want to come back, don't want to come back, want to see what the governor says on August 17th. I do just want to clarify, we are meeting weekly with the governor and the Department of Health and the commissioner of the Department of Ed. And the governor is ready for a full reopening based on metrics. What she said yesterday was that there would only be 3 communities not opening based on the metrics. With that being said, we are not one of those. So she expects the districts to be able to plan all 4 phases. Chariho did that and we are ready. However, we also recognize that many of our families wanted the distance learning option. The governor listened to the superintendents, understanding how many were requesting that option, and then made that a choice last Wednesday. We also know it's frustrating that we have to have a deadline, but please know that we have to plan. A lot of you are asking about schedules. Well, which teacher do I have? We can't even make those decisions unless we know who is doing what and what the plan is. When will I know if I get a bus? That's why this is important. And if you do not register by tomorrow, then we're just going to move forward planning that you're going to do whatever the governor decides. Now, August 17th is going to arrive and there may be new metrics and she may have a new phase. August 20th could be something different. October 1st. So what we want you to know is we as a district will implement whatever plan the governor decides based on those metrics. We don't get to make that decision or change the phase. The only additional option is if you say, you know what, I'm not going to wait for any phases to be determined. I'm just going to go in distance learning. That is your choice. And if you choose that, it's for the quarter or semester. We recognize that people's lives change, things shift in the family. And if that's something that happens, you would reach out to your administrators and then on a case-by-case basis, we'll work with you. So that's just a little bit. Before I kick it over to so Jane can say hello, and then our fabulous high school administrators can talk to you about their planning. I just want to let you know that once they talk through the high school plan, at the bottom of your screen, there's a button that says participants. When the high school team asks you for questions, you're going to click on that button and then there'll be an option for you to raise your hand. I will call out people's name one at a time, and then you'll unmute yourself. Please keep yourself muted until you're talking, because then it allows for feedback and it gets a little difficult. But I'll go over it if you have any questions. Just don't raise your hand in the box because we won't see you because there's already 5 pages of people. So thank you for coming tonight, and I'm going to let Jane say a few words.
Thank you, Gina. Like Gina said, the administrators and the teachers, I think they did a fabulous job last spring, along with the parents. So it was just amazing how the whole community came together for our students. And I know that we'll be able to do that again this fall, no matter what comes. So just thank you. And I know the high school is very excited about talking to you about their plans.
So welcome everyone, I'm Craig Mckenzie. If you're new to the Chariho School District, I'm the principal at Chariho Regional High School. I'm here with Andrea Spaz, the assistant principal for teaching and learning, and Jerry Oth, who's the director of CHARIHotech. And I just wanna say thank you to all families for the input that you've provided over the course of the last couple of months as we try to shape our plans. We feel good about the work that we've done in planning for the various phases, if only because we've relied on really thoughtful input from our students, from our teachers, our faculty and staff, from parents, and we've inputted the guidance that we got from the state as well in making our decisions. I want to let you know that safety of our students and of our faculty and staff has been at the forefront of our thinking as we designed our plans, and not only safety, but sustainability as well. So we like to talk about the fact that when the pandemic arrived, we responded so well. I thought everyone was prepared, everybody stepped up, people shifted gears and adjusted their schedules and their mindset so that we could achieve as much as possible in teaching and learning in the spring. And I like to think about that as a byproduct of some amazing adrenaline that we all had in responding to a crisis. But what we're planning on this year has to have sustainability. We're talking about doing something for an entire year. And I'm challenging and reaching out to all of you to support the school administration, faculty, and staff in implementing our protocols as we go into the building, because they are going to be challenging. The expectations that we work with about what school looks like are going to be a little bit different. And fundamental safety protocols like masking, walking through a flow chart that kind of says this is how traffic patterns have to look like within the building, getting to school and going directly to your first block class, little elements that we've built in to ensure our safety. They're only going to work to mitigate risk if we all implement those with fidelity. So for parents, I really need you supporting our school community and reinforcing that students need to follow those with fidelity, just in the same way that as an administrator, I'm going to be asking students, faculty, and staff to do the same as well. So very proud of the district, and I think about all of us collectively as a team in terms of the planning that we've done. I think we're very responsive as a community, and we're eager to see how we're designated as a school community so that we can kind of finalize our plans. I'm going to turn it over to Andrea Spaz, our assistant principal for teaching and learning right now. She's going to take you very briefly through an overview of our schedule and our 4 phases. It's something that you've probably seen in the frequently asked questions and in some of the overview work that we've sent out to you over the course of the last 3 weeks or so. And then we're going to open it up to questions that you may have that aren't addressed in the FAQs. And even if they are, we'll try to provide answers for you where we can. Welcome.
Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that I'm sharing my screen with you. And what I've pulled up here is our reopening schedule and all of our planning logistics. Again, just to echo what Craig had said, this couldn't have been done without a whole bunch of input from a lot of different players throughout the community, from parents to students to faculty. They've really shared a lot of input in the design of this schedule, as well as our 3 reopening scenarios. So a lot of you have already had a chance to preview this, so we're not going to go into great detail tonight about all the specifics, because some of that might come up through your questions tonight, but we just wanted to give a brief overview before we kicked off. So what you're seeing here right in front of you is our schedule, and we were really deliberate in that our building schedule can be really flexible and fluid, that in the case we had a switch from full to partial to limited, we could use the same schedule. So we didn't have to go to an entirely different building schedule. So that was really deliberate in the design of this plan here. As you can see, we have green and white days, and we have 4 blocks throughout the day. In the case of our 50% plan, which we're gonna get to in a little bit, there are virtual Mondays where we do have 8 blocks that day. And that's a little bit further down below. Some of the feedback we received from parents was to try to shorten some of our blocks and to increase the amount of passing and movement break time. So we have built those times in here. What's really important to note is that we are guided by the state in terms of how many instructional minutes we are required to have every day. So we are required to have 330 minutes of instructional time. The state made sure that we stuck to that. So we do have 330 minutes with this schedule. So we're meeting the state requirements there. So that is our building schedule. Again, it applies to all 3 scenarios that we're going to be going over tonight. And please know that this schedule applies for students who are both in person and virtual. So all students are following the same schedule. I'm going to scroll down here and start walking through the 3 scenarios. So the first one is full in person. This is when all 100% of our students are expected to be in our building. and we are attempting to maintain stable groups. And when those are not possible, we're going to adhere to students maintaining the 6 feet of physical distance. And if that's not possible, wearing of the face masks. And you will see we have our green and white calendar inserted there. That's your typical green and white calendar. And I have it pulled up over here. Actually, I'm gonna just open this up for you. And it just shows you that this is the calendar that we will be following in this scenario. This is the 100% full in person. The vacation days are here, as well as the state PD days. So there are certain PD days that the state has identified where our faculty must have PD, and those will be virtual learning days for students, and those are indicated in this calendar. The next scenario is partial in person, and this is where we have 50% of our students in our building. I spoke to the Monday virtual day, so Monday will be a virtual day in this scenario. We're gonna have an 8-block schedule, and then on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, students with the last name beginning with A through J will attend. And then on Thursdays and Fridays, students with the last name K through Z will be attending. There's a little visual down here that captures what this looks like. So in-person instruction, you can see who's expected to be in the building for in-person instruction, and for virtual remote instruction, you can see that here as well. I'm going to click on, show you this 50% green and white calendar. And so what we have done here is we have shown you what the green and white calendar would look like in a 50% partial scenario. Again, the distance learning days will be on Mondays, and then A through J attends Tuesday, Wednesday, and K through Z attending Thursday and Friday. And then our third scenario, which is limited in person, and this is 25% of our population attending. So we have the fact that we are trying to target all grade levels with this limited in-person scenario. We have made some adjustments to this scenario very recently with feedback that we received from our school improvement team, from our department heads, from parents and students. So we have updated that, and we have indicated here that that has been recently revised. And what we were able to do is indicate that we have been able to get more grade levels in the building. So at first there was a strong focus on 9th grade. The feedback that we received was to try to integrate more of the grades throughout that. So we had been able to do that with some planning that went into, and some creative planning with our calendar. And this is what we are thinking. So the first month of September, we would be looking at having week 1, grade 9, week 2, grade 10, week 3, grade 11, and week 4, grade 12. And that allows all of those grade levels to be exposed to their teachers and to form those relationships and see them in person that first month. We didn't want a grade level not to meet with their teachers in person for the month of September. We thought that was very critical. And then what we decided was grade 9 will attend every other week, with grades 10, 11, and 12 rotating within those off weeks. The way we had it scheduled before was that grade 9 was in 3 weeks in a row, and then another grade level would report. This now allows grade 9 level students to still attend more frequently, but allows grades 10 through 12 to attend much more often throughout the year. I'm going to show you another green-white calendar that captures what this looks like for each grade level. So on this green-white calendar, it looks similar to the 50%, but you'll notice here on the right side of each week, we have indicated which grade level we'll be attending. And as you can see, we have a variety of grades here. Again, like I had mentioned, in September, grades 9 through 12 all report, and then we do the rotating of all the grades. We did focus for May and June to prioritize our grade 9 and grade 12 students. Parents and seniors specifically requested that they be in the building towards the end of the school year. That is a critical time for those populations, and it's really important that we make sure we prioritize our senior class as we near graduation. So that's a quick summary of our 3 plans. We do have some specifics we're going to get into in terms of logistics. I'm going to pass that over to Mr. Mack. Did you want to go over the hallway
So one of the things that was critical in our planning is really thinking about some fundamental protocols that ensure, again, that we can mitigate risk as much as possible. And one of those related specifically to how it is that students moved around. It was really impossible given the offerings that we provide in our core and electives to pod our students in any particular way. So in organizing our flow chart for how students move around the building, we tried to ensure that students would never be crossing paths. You're never going to be walking by a student going in the opposite direction. We've set some stuff up with our teaching assistants where they're going to be monitoring doors for some of the exterior exits to increase and manage the flow of students in our building to ensure that there's minimal cross contact as students move around the building. And this is something that we're going to try to do some virtual messaging in terms of videos that we're going to provide students, not only around walking through the hallways, but about efficiencies as well. If you saw in our schedule, we've got extended passing periods. They're 10 minutes long. Historically, we have closed our bathrooms during passing periods so that we can kind of manage that. We're going to be keeping bathrooms closed for 5 minutes before and after, or at the beginning and at the end of passing periods as well, to provide our custodians with time to clean those bathrooms between blocks. So that's another subtle change. Again, there's going to be so much pressure put on our staff to manage some of the cleaning protocols as a way of ensuring that as students move into new instructional areas, that those have been cleaned, and we're counting on students to support teachers and staff in doing that in order to ensure that we can stay in the building and mitigate risk. Another protocol that we implemented, you'll notice that our school day starts a little bit later. We worked collaboratively with CALA and with the middle school to ensure that we could do that because faculty begins supervision of students at 7:25. And this change in schedule ensures that when students walk into the building, that they can walk directly to their first period class. So if you know anything about the high school, you'll know historically that our students like to loop around the A, B, C, and D hallways. And it's actually kind of a cultural phenomenon, if I might say so myself, but it's something that's really not going to be a part of our protocols going forward if we're to mitigate risk for exposures in the building. So students are going to have the option to come in. The only kind of variance on our protocols related to coming into school in the morning is we do have some buses that come from sending schools a little bit early. We're going to find pods of places where we can host you while we're waiting for school to start. We also have some students who come in and eat breakfast in the morning, and those breakfasts are going to be grab and go. And that would be one other variance. If you're coming in to get breakfast in the morning, you can grab that. And then we're going to ask you to go directly to your first block class to minimize traffic in the hallways in the morning. If there's a reason why a student has to go somewhere else in the morning, they'll check in the office, get a pass to do so, and then follow our footpath, our flow chart, which will all be labeled in the hallways so that they can move as efficiently and effectively as possible around the building. We've got a number of health protocols set up through our nurse in terms of addressing concerns if students are sick during the day, and those you can find in the FAQs and in some of our overviews. We're not going to go into any of the details of that. We're minimizing the sharing of resources, and our teachers are being really creative and thinking about how they can implement their curriculum and minimize the sharing of resources. We're organizing classrooms in ways that allow us to create the distancing that we need to effectively meet the criteria that the state has mandated. In some cases, to be really candid, we're not going to be able to do that, and that's going to demand that those in that classroom mask up. And I want to be really clear about this. When we say masking, we're talking about your mask being over your nose, not under your nose. These are things that are fundamental essentials of mitigating risk in our school community. They're going to be non-negotiable for our students, and it's really important that in mitigating risk, we do as much as we can. We've got adult faculty, we've got students, we've got staff that all have either vulnerabilities or vulnerabilities in their families. And while we don't pretend to be able to control COVID-19, we can mitigate as much risk as possible in our school community by working collaboratively to do so. So understand that we're going to be messaging out beyond the details in our plan, which I encourage you to read carefully, expectations so that students walking in the building are walking in clear, understanding what it is that they need to do. At this point, I just want to do a quick introduction to Jerry Ott, the director of the Career and Technical Center, if he wants to say a few words, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Craig. I just want to say hello to everyone, introduce myself, Jerry Ott, proud director of the Career and Technical Center. Obviously, we have a lot going on trying to juggle the amount of students we get from sending communities, and I know transportation isn't obviously on the tip of everyone's mind, and we have a lot to get done in a short amount of time. We are still registering kids, still finalizing some of those schedules, but just know that we work closely with the transportation departments from each district, and once we get those plans, we'll be able to, and we hear from the governor about her opening plans, it'll help develop what we're going to do internally. But as far as the career and technical courses, we are obviously one with the high school and would follow any type of schedule that is implemented at Chariho Regional High School will be the same schedule that's implemented at the Career and Technical Center. So I know that's a question we've often got from parents is what type of schedule are you going to do versus the high school? And we're such a close team. We are going to all work together and do what's best for kids. So I look forward, and just, the conversations I've had with parents this week and last week and since March 13th have been outstanding. Parents are very reasonable. They understand what's going on, and I can obviously expect that to continue as we enter into this new phase of whatever September is going to look like. Thank you.
All right, so at this point, we'll open it up to questions. I think Superintendent Picard is going to manage the questions. We'll take them as they go. If I don't have the answers, I'm definitely going to pass it over to Jerry.
Okay. We have Peggy's iPad.
Okay. So I'm interested in how will classes such as biotechnology and biology, those specifically, but in other classes like that where a lot of the work is generally hands-on, are the students going to be set kits, or are we going to be doing in a simulated like environment?
So in some of the courses, and I've talked directly with our department head, Catherine Sagamang, in science about how we can best implement. In some cases, the potential is there that it could be, I'll give you a couple of scenarios. One is it's impossible to provide every individual student with a kit. So maybe they work in groups and only one student is responsible for doing particulars of the lab where they're actually touching the equipment related to it, and the others are recorders or presenters or documenting in some way, shape, or form. There could be scenarios where the circumstances demand that the teacher do a model of the lab and that the students pay attention and document any kind of data that's gathered, ask questions or what have you. And then there are probably some scenarios as well where, given the resources that we have, each student is able to have their own. The same applies for art. We're trying to be very creative about how it is that we manage the resources that we have to ensure that students have as much opportunity as possible to do what we would consider to be called like applied learning types of experiences. But those are some of the issues that teachers are kind of navigating right now as we go through the beginning of the school year.
Okay. Desiree Richard.
Hi, this is her mom. I have a question about the distance learning. If you choose that option, not us specifically, but I have a friend who couldn't be here tonight and wanted me to find out, with parents that may be single parents and may be highly vulnerable to this type of thing, is there any way to do a distance learning option for school and then the CTC courses in person? Is that an option that anyone's looked into?
So go ahead, Craig. Do you want to?
At this point, that is not a part of any of our plans. Really, the CTC programs are elective courses in many ways, just like even though they work towards industry certifications and so many of our students are a part of them, it would just be really challenging and kind of undermine the integrity of the protections that we're trying to put into place to have students jumping in and out of our live learning environments.
Thank you.
Okay, Valerie Spiridolosi.
Hi. Well, Desiree's mom took my question.
I saw your email right when I got home a little bit ago. I was gonna.
Well, I'll ask a separate, a related question. I mean, my daughter's very concerned about she's already concerned about how many hours she missed for cosmetology to get towards licensure from March to June.
Yep.
So she's wondering, going into junior year, how will she get enough hours built up?
Yeah, we're still going to run that same schedule that, and the hours that they put into Pivot Point were counted towards their hours. So as far as I know right now, and I'll double check for you, I'll shoot you an email in the morning. But as far as I know, they're not deficient because of the distance learning, because of the instruction they received with the online management system we implemented last year. But I'll be sure to email you in the morning.
Okay, great. Thank you, because she is a little nervous. I'm also nervous that in the 50% scenario, and this would be for any of the classes, I mean, basically, when you go to school, whatever your last name is, you'll see kids from 4 of your classes on a Tuesday and then the other 4 on a Wednesday. So you've seen everybody A through J in the whole, well, okay, you haven't seen everybody, but you've mixed and matched with 8 different classrooms full of kids all day over 2 days, and somebody could have had COVID on Tuesday and wouldn't know it by Wednesday at all.
Craig, you're muted.
There's no question that in the schedule that we've created, really all we're trying to do is at once mitigate risk and secondly, try to create as many live learning opportunities as possible. And I think one of the ways that we were most responsive was thinking about putting our students in a situation where they could actually be socially distanced within a classroom and probably have learning experience where they didn't have to be masked, which is critical. I think the other component too is our families spoke loudly and clearly that they needed there to be as much consistency as possible between the middle school and the high school in terms of when students were coming into the building. We've got many families that have students at the high school, middle school, and elementary schools, and making sure that those instructional times were as aligned as possible was critical. So that's why we chose to work alphabetically across the secondary schools. And again, all of these are non-ideals, but one of the things that again is at the forefront beyond safety is that sustainability too, is like how can we maintain as much live instruction as possible over an extended period of time? And we're thinking semesters and as much as possible. So.
Okay, we have Valerie, no, we did Valerie, Julie Loring. Julie?
Okay, yep. Hi, I was just wondering if there's any plan to extend parking so that juniors that could have cars could be guaranteed a spot so they wouldn't have to take the bus.
There is, and we've been working on some parking logistics. We're trying to secure more parking spaces for students in particular on campus as it is, but one of our early thoughts is we prioritize senior parking first of all, and what we'd like to do is try to loosen some of the parking expectations that allow students to get a parking pass so that we can get as many students in the senior class parking spaces. Once we've identified all the students in the senior class that need a parking space, we're going to open the remaining parking up to juniors. In the 50% scenario, what we would probably do is double up on some parking spots. So say, for example, the students who are seniors in A through J, we would double them up with juniors in K through Z because we could probably park the entire school, and that would, it opens up essentially 250 spots if we're creative that way. So like I said, we're gonna lessen the expectations, the criteria for gaining a parking spot. Those are actually really powerful levers to keep students engaged in learning, but we understand that transportation is really gonna be a critical consideration for families, and our goal is to create as many parking spaces for juniors and seniors as possible.
Okay, great, thanks.
Sarah.
Hi, how are you? My question is related to maybe a little bit of mind reading on what the governor is going to do as it relates to the different plans. So has she set any expectations that she could start with full opening, 2 weeks later it could go to 50%, 2 weeks later it could go to 25%? Has she set any sort of standards as with you as like what to expect based on how frequently she could potentially change her mind around that?
So basically, she's put up 5 metrics, and one is the statewide data. The second is the community data. The third is, our ability to be able to get the testing within the 48 to 72 hours. It's our ability to have the correct cleaning equipment as well as PPE. And then it's also our ability as a district to have all 4 phases ready to go. So with all that, she's ready to do that. Basically, what she said on Wednesday was she'd be ready to fully reopen every district except for 3. And those are the metrics that she's using. And you're right, it could change daily, it could change weekly, but those are the metrics that she's using.
Okay, thank you. And then a follow-up question as it relates to the approach. So if we do go full in school and don't sign up for the virtual option, but we're dealing with, some sort of regular sickness, right, as we do every year back to school and as regular flu season hits, do we have the virtual option so that the kids don't miss they can just sort of flip initially, right? They don't have to sign up for virtual to have that as an option.
So if you don't sign up for the distance learning option, then you'll automatically be in whatever phase the governor implements. With that being said, we're asking both staff and families to stay home if you're feeling ill, fever, cough, sniffles. So what the difference will be that typically in the past you would call in your child sick. Now you'll call in your child and say they are sick, but they will be doing distance learning, or they're sick and they're unable to participate. So those will be the options, and then we'll code them as per RIDE as requiring us to be able to do that, which is why the testing for the 48 to 72 hours is important. You can imagine that if the high school has 15 teachers that aren't feeling well, we could be potentially shutting down that week. So it really is something that that we could not wait 2 weeks for testing. That would have big impacts on our ability to be able to do full in-person learning. So that's why it's one of the metrics. Okay, so Phyllis Penhallow.
Hi, thanks for having the meeting. This is for Craig and Andrea and Jerry. I was just wondering if you could tell us, because you know all the details of what's going on. What do you think each of you, what do you think would really be the smoothest way, if in your opinion, because you know all the ins and outs?
Did you want my personal opinion, Phyllis?
Sure.
Personally, honestly, I think the 50% is probably an ideal in some ways. I think we're ready and prepared to go in full. I think those are going to be, it's going to be extremely challenging to manage that in a school of 1,100 students, but we've made preparations to ready ourselves to do that if that's what we're asked to do.
Craig always speaks for the team. He's our fearless leader. But I'll jump in and say, selfishly, from a career and tech standpoint, obviously we want the applied learning opportunities and we value the hands-on approach. But I also have to understand, and we're going to obviously work as a team. It's not a CHARIHotech decision, based on what's going to happen in career and tech. But I understand probably the 50% option would be a safer way. We could still get the kids with their hands-on learning, the applied learning, and instruction at home. So that seems like a good option. But selfishly, we need to be in the building as much as possible for the career and tech.
I concur with Jerry on that selfish part.
What they both said, I agree.
What a team. What a team. We didn't even practice that.
They nailed it. Yeah.
Never practiced.
Grace.
Yes, so I have a question for Mr. Auth. My daughter's going to be going into the health careers, and I know the first year they were supposed to do an every other week trip to the hospital, which obviously is not going to happen this year. Will they be able to do that, and maybe if things go back to normal next year or junior year, will they have that opportunity to go into the field trips to the hospital?
Yeah, this is definitely going to force us to take a look at our scope and sequence and the way we offer and deliver our programs. We haven't figured out what that step after distance learning is going to look like, but if you're asking me, is that an option to do that? Yes. That the 4 years of any one of our programs now has been turned inside out to try to adjust the deliverables. So yes, that's an option.
Okay, and then I did have another question regarding the distance learning option. If we don't sign up for the first semester, will we be able to do that? If there should be an influx of numbers and Gina Raimondo doesn't shut the schools down into the distance learning, can we opt into doing that the following semester?
At the close of the semester, anyone would be able to change their decision. We would be providing that opportunity, which is why we said for the high school and middle school, it'll be the 45 days, which is the quarter. And then for elementary school, it's by trimester.
Okay. Okay, and also lastly, lunches, will they be in the cafeteria? Will they be eating together?
Yes, we've kind of done an overview of how we could appropriately space out the lunchroom. We're trying to be creative, looking at some smaller table spaces that we can use. We're exploring the potential of using an area in the Career and Technical Center as an alternate lunch area so that we can support, especially if we're in full and all students are in the building. And we're looking at some other considerations regarding how we can best support students. If you noticed in the schedule, we changed to a total of 6 lunches during the school day, and we did so just to minimize the total number of students because there are protocols that say that we can only have so many students at each phase in one particular area. So we've done some pre-organization of the cafeteria. It's being painted right now, so we don't have it all set up so you could see it, but we'll take some pictures that kind of provide an overview. And like I said, we're trying to be creative with some smaller table spaces that potentially can keep students safely distanced, but provide more lunch spaces in the CAF as well.
Okay, will they have an opportunity to wash hands before they go in, or is it just strictly hand sanitizer?
It's probably going to be strictly hand sanitizer as students go into the building or go into the cafeteria. And again, we're also hoping for, a full 182 days of perfect weather outside so that we can incorporate the beautiful outdoor spaces that we have on campus as part of our lunch.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Karen?
Hi, my son Evan really wants to do distance learning, but he's in the career and tech. And he found it almost impossible to do distance learning when you're doing construction. And you need to do, I don't know, he was given certain examples, watch YouTube videos, and it was extremely impossible to do. And also, I don't believe that they did their OSHA certificates that they were supposed to be doing. That's one question. The other question is about, since we possibly may have a lot more people dropping off and picking up, the flow that we have when we drop off and pick up does not work. It's always backlogged. And now that we can't get our students there earlier, what is being done about that?
I can grab the construction question first. So we did make, just like I spoke about earlier, adjusting some of the curriculum options, that the distance learning did affect some of the certifications that we were able to offer. Fortunately, we do have time for the underclassmen to adjust those services and try to get those certifications to the students by the time they graduate and or enter the workforce and need them. Distance learning for the hands-on trades, no doubt, is a challenge. We have programs like welding, automotive, marine, construction, cosmetology, health careers, on and on, that the hands-on approach is crucial to the success of the program. I'm confident that we're going to get back there at some point, but we did have to make adjustments and keep safety in mind. So my message to the teachers was, you can provide that distance learning, you can provide an understanding of the concepts, but we have to be mindful of safety as well. We can't send Johnny into the garage to play with mom or dad's tools to cut X, Y, or Z and do different things. So you are 100% correct. It is not the same deliverable for some of those hands-on programs, but we're making the best of what we can, and we're adjusting to offer those certifications at a different time. As far as the traffic, I don't know, Craig, if you want to jump in.
Absolutely.
But yet they won't give the option of just coming in for the career and tech program.
That, yeah, it's not enough. We have
When we
considered
have
that.
we have a lot of parents that, this is coming from my son, who
Yeah.
only wants to go in for career and tech, and he can do all his virtual stuff online. He's okay with that. But, and I'm sure I'm not the only parent in career and tech that is thinking this, or, you know, but yet it's not even on the radar for you guys, or even an option.
Well, it's not that it's not on the radar. It's that transportation to provide equitable experience for all the students who are enrolled in all the programs is that's almost inconceivable in terms of budgetary concerns. And I know, you know, some parents would be more than willing to drive their kids in for the time of the day that they can, but that's not the case for every family. And again, the CTC programs, which are the heart of so much of what we do as a school community that we value, and we value applied learning experiences in every single one of our classes. But there's some fundamental consistencies in how we have to approach bringing kids back to school, again, so that we can make it sustainable to get as much applied learning experience during the entire school year. We understand that distance learning is not ideal for applied learning experiences. And again, those are the difficult decisions that individual families are going to have to make. I understand.
Okay.
I understand
Another question. Is CTC every day construction, or was it only, I didn't get a chance to really look at that.
Each grade level has a slot in one of our 8 blocks in the schedule when they meet.
The career and tech class typically meets every other day. Cosmetology is a little different, but typically meets every other day.
So construction is every other day.
Correct.
Oh, okay. And they're not allowed in school if they have a sniffle. Correct?
Any child that has any symptoms should be staying home.
Okay, perfect.
You want me to talk a little bit, Karen, about the
drop off and pick off? Absolutely.
Again, you know, I've been at CHARIHO.
Chaotic.
It's going to be my 9th year. There's no question we're a single road with multiple entries, and we're the largest geographical district in the state, and we bus over 40 buses in and out of there in about a 15-minute period that tends to coincide with when parents are dropping students off. And I would say to you, I agree that it gets a little cutthroat, especially in the drive-in loop in front of the high school in particular.
Yeah.
And in the middle school as well, because you're competing with people who are coming in while you're trying to go out. And we try to mitigate that as much as possible with parents or faculty members who are on bus duty. But my response would be that, and again, I think the challenge is exacerbated by the fact that we're asking people to show up somewhere around 7:25 so that students can walk directly to their classes to kind of minimize their congregating or kids being in the hallways. So that does present new challenges. I would just ask all parents to be patient and to be supportive of each other. I can talk about numerous experiences where I've seen things get a little testy and where people maybe take a little bit more time, or and I know it creates frustration when people are trying to get to school on time, and understand that from a school point of view, that we realize that that's going to be challenging, and there's grace as it relates to beginning of the day attendance. We want students to get into school. We want our pickup and drop off to be as safe as possible. And we ask all of our school community members to be patient with each other, as we're going to be patient with students who maybe don't get to school exactly on time because of challenges related to getting kids into school safely. I absolutely understand what you're talking about. I used to try to navigate, direct traffic in the mornings there, and it's a very challenging experience.
Now, I have one in the middle school and also one in the high school. Do you recommend, because the middle school, you wait at least 30 minutes, if not more, and this is pre-pandemic. Does the high school side flow smoothly, and I'll just have my middle school get dropped off at the high school and then they can walk over? I don't know which way to do it.
That is absolutely something that parents do. I would recommend probably a single drop-off, not a double drop-off, if you're going to be going to one location. We have plenty of parents with siblings at each, and they make one drop-off and someone gets to walk.
Well, I didn't know from experience, you guys being there for so long, which side runs smoother?
Oh, the high school runs
High
smooth.
school.
We say that all the time.
High school, all day.
Okay.
School, yeah.
I don't think Mr. Zenion's on this call.
No, because the middle school area needs to be addressed. I mean, pre-pandemic, I'm in line for a good 30 to 35 minutes, sometimes 40 minutes, just sitting there waiting. It's crazy.
It is crazy.
Okay, thank you.
Brian Newitt?
Yes, good evening, thank you. So I'm looking, I've been looking through the distance learning bullets that were presented. I feel that, that could be my understanding of them, that you're still working through the process of the distance learning program, yet you want us to make a choice. Well, we really don't know what's going to happen as far as whether it's going to be live streamed or similar to what they did during the spring. And I applaud everyone's efforts, but it obviously wasn't the same level of education they were getting in person. If a child is doing distance learning, my question is, it's easy for them to fall behind very quickly. And 45 days is a long time to go if a child is struggling. How is the school going to react and adjust and help those students if they choose to do the distance learning, but then very quickly start falling behind?
Well, I'll say that one of the things I feel the best about during the spring was the ability of our support personnel to intervene on behalf of students who are struggling. And I think one of the challenges is not just the identification that a student is struggling. And I think that demands candid communication. It demands a little bit of self-advocacy from students. It demands parents having candid conversations with their students daily about what's working and not working, and our teachers reading how students are performing and engaging in school from distance learning. I'd say one of the protocols that we're really going to reinforce this year that wasn't necessarily a standard expectation across the board is that students be live on their meets. We know now, and we can train every single student to put a beautiful facade behind their face when they're learning, so it looks like they're, there's waves breaking in Waikiki behind them or what have you. So there's no concern about the environment that they're in, or other students or parent or faculty members seeing the environment they're in. That's something that I know our students are easily trained to do. We can make it a trained protocol at the beginning of the school year. But when students engage in distance learning and don't show their faces in those meets, and I know that represents some anxieties for some students, those are things that we're more than willing and able to support students in working through, because your expressions on meets give us an indication about how it is that you're feeling, about what it is you're saying. To be candid, I can't really tell how you're reacting to what I'm saying right now because you're not live, but you can tell exactly how I feel about our readiness to provide quality distance learning. So those are some of those norms that I think can help our teachers to better identify students' struggles and intervene proactively. But we have tremendous student support in math and reading in particular. Our RTI programs are going to continue to function. We've got push-in support through our student support center that's going to be a combination of one of our social workers helping students with executive functioning, organizational skills, training students, particularly ninth graders, to explicit academic skills and dispositions that are essential to being successful, whether you're in the building or in distance learning. But we don't have any illusions that it's not the same. Distance learning is not the same, and it's much more challenging for students than live learning, because there's a level of self-directedness and self-discipline that really is a part of it. But my message to all of our students is going to be about self-advocacy, about partnering, creating accountability partners within your classes so that you can communicate with somebody, maybe somebody who's in live learning, as a way of staying as connected as possible to what's happening. And I'm so proud of our teachers right now, and I would say this to everybody on the meet. The people who are tasked with the greatest challenge are the teachers in our building who are going to try to mitigate and navigate and support providing quality instruction to both distance and live learners at the same time. That is daunting. And we need the support of parents. They need my administrative support, and they need the support of students as self-advocates for what's working and not working, and being their best self when they are in instructional time, whether it's distance or live learning. And we get that it doesn't work for everyone, and that people, if it wasn't for the pandemic, potentially would be choosing to be live. But I understand the anxieties that come with that as well. If a student's in the building and they're anxious about being there because of concerns about their health or safety, probably not a lot of learning is taking place either. So we need to create comfort with families and with students, that we've prepared our building as well as possible to provide quality, safe learning experiences for students. And students and parents need to support the school community in following the protocols that ensure that we can sustain live learning as much as possible.
Just to add on to the piece about supporting the struggling students, we are fortunate in that we have layers of support in our building, from school psychologists to social workers. Even our deans' roles shifted while we were virtual to provide a little bit more support for our at-risk students who were just not connecting when they were virtual. So there's been a lot of protocols that were put in place, and a lot of outreach systems to make sure that we connect with those students who may be a little disconnected. I also, we can't not mention our fabulous teaching assistants who really stepped up in so many ways to support students who were struggling, and whether they scheduled individual one-on-one meets with students to help support any gaps, or did some group meets. The feedback we received from our teachers, our parents, and students was that our TAs provided a lot of valuable support as well, in addition to our reading and math specialists. So it really, you know, it's a whole community of systems of support.
So it doesn't really sound like there's much of an option if they do start falling behind quickly.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
It doesn't really sound like there's much of an option, or it's been thought out, much like the distance learning program that I've read, you know, when someone does start failing.
Well, when they do, we try to intervene. We try to create, we set up meets with students. We engage parents and students. We have communication about the potential for providing accommodations or interventions that support them re-engaging. So
we have specific reading and math specialists who provide evidence-based interventions to students, and we still do that while they're virtual. You know, we have a range, we have tiers of support, whether it's students who are struggling in just reading or just math, to students who may need 504 accommodations, to students who may have an IEP and special ed services and get services from their special education teachers. So there really is a variety of tiers of support, but it's really based on specific student need. And there are referral procedures, and we do some proactive screening twice a year in the fall and winter to make sure that we don't miss any students who are falling behind. So we have reading and math measures that are administered to students to make sure we put that safety net in place to catch students who might not be meeting academic standards.
And we do have policy in place that says if a student's grade falls below a 70, that the teacher is responsible for reaching out to parents in support of trying to create accommodations or interventions to get them re-engaged and successful.
And I also just want to mention not just academic supports, but supports for social emotional health as well. We have a pretty solid referral process for students who are struggling with social emotional needs, and we have proactive interventions that we administer for students who might, you know, need some support in that area.
Okay, so our next is Stephen Simmington.
Hi, thank you. Can you tell me a little bit about what that 80-minute block is going to look like for the actual student that's in person and then also remote? And, you know, and a follow-up to that is, will students that are taking courses remotely have a dedicated instructor?
So at this time, the instructor of record is going to be the instructor for both live and distance learning. teachers are going to be creative in terms of figuring out how they can give instructional attention at different times during that 80-minute block, both to the students who are there and to the students who are in distance learning. I would call the distance learning agenda kind of the anchor of probably every lesson, and I leave it to the specific discipline, because each discipline has different needs and demands for how it is the teacher can best communicate during that 80-minute block with the students who are in distance learning and the students who are in live learning. I think there's, like I said, I think there's the potential for pairing students who are part of the live instruction with students who are in distance to create accountability partnerships. Those are things that we're exploring instructionally, but every discipline has its own needs. Every student has strengths and weaknesses in some disciplines and others, and we're trying to give our teachers who are tasked with thinking about how to manage students who are live and distance some flexibility in terms of how they approach it.
So will it be simulcasting?
There's not going to be like a live streaming, I guess I would say, of instruction that happens in the classroom. I think the students who are in distance learning are going to know they're going to get a protocol, a norm that says that they have to go in and look through the agenda for the day. The teacher check-in could happen based on planning at different times during that lesson for the distance learners, or at different times for the live learners as well, depending on the demands of the lesson and the agenda of the day.
Sorry, I have another follow-up. I'm sorry. Then how does that setup actually meet the 330 minutes of school time that CHARIHO sort of puts forward as what one of its learning outcomes is?
Well, because engagement can take different forms. And in our ideal classroom setting where all of our students are in the building, sometimes teachers provide direct instruction to students for 20 minutes and then put students in group work or individualized work, or task them with a research challenge that takes up some or all of the instructional time remaining. And then there's a exit ticket or a close out reflection on the lesson that takes some time as well. So all of that time, the time that students are charged with working independently in self-directed tasks, or if they're charged with collaborating with someone who's either distance or live, or the time that they're directly engaged with the teacher, either they're in small, large groups or in one-on-one conference, count as instructional time.
So then last follow-up, because I don't necessarily agree with that in the sense that if a student's all in person, they still have access to the instructor, and a remote student won't have the same kind of access that are in person.
Well, we're asking our teachers to dedicate an amount of time to addressing questions that students in distance learning have during the course of that instructional block. Again, we're not talking about instructional ideals here. We're talking about sustainable reals given the circumstances, and given that we've got some students who are going to opt for distance learning and some students are going to be in their live. When teachers are in a classroom with 30 students and 15 of their students are demanding the teacher's attention on something individual, every student, it's impossible for the teacher to address the individual needs of every single student when they've got that many students asking questions. So they take them one at a time. And I think that's the case for distance learning as it would be for live learning as well.
Okay. So last question, I promise, is then what have you done to train your students, to train your faculty to better teach remote learners? I recognize in the spring it all kind of fell upon us last minute, but certainly you must have been able to go through some professional development with your faculty now. What does that look like?
Yeah.
There's no question.
Yep. Sorry.
Andrea wants to talk about that.
Very excited about the professional development offerings that we provide our faculty this spring, and that we're going to be providing on our 2 district PD days coming up in August as well throughout the year. So as you know, the state provided us with designated PD days, a full day of PD for our teachers. We had a variety of teachers host what we call unconference sessions, which are 30 to 60-minute sessions on a variety of virtual tools, technology resources, best instructional practices for virtual learning. They were able to sign up based on interest and need. We did that throughout many of the sessions. We also, right before the week before we had to go virtual, we had that short week notice, if even a week, we offered a variety of optional trainings during that vacation week that was for teachers, and we had many teachers sign up for that as well. We've also administered district PD surveys to survey our faculty to see what their needs were, and a variety of trainings on a variety of different platforms were provided to our faculty, and we look forward to offering PD on how to make sure that we can meet the needs of all learners this August, and that's going to take a look at how to meet all learners' needs virtually as well. Like, one of the things that we've been talking about is establishing relationships with our students virtually, and how do we meet the needs of struggling students virtually, and that's been a big topic tonight. So
I think one of the other great professional developments was trial under fire as well. Not only did we implement in a short period of time, but we listened carefully to our students and to our parents about what was working and not working. And we made adjustments in policy and in practice over the course of the spring as we tried to identify what was successful and not successful in distance learning. And I would say that about my entire faculty. They're responsive, they adapt quickly, they're committed to making sure that kids can learn in challenging circumstances. And I think that experience alone and our commitment to reflecting on those experiences is going to have a huge impact on our practice. I'll just say, by the way, too, because you were referring to instructional minutes, Ms. Paz referenced those professional development days, which are essentially called distance learning days, where our teachers are going to be training. They're going to create an agenda for students during those days that students are going to have to complete in a self-directed way, and that counts as instructional minutes according to the state. So again, not our ideal in terms of what instruction looks like, but in order to make sure that we have opportunities as faculty and staff to reflect on what we're doing and make adjustments to ensure that the needs of individuals or students, individual students are met, I think it makes sense.
Jenna. Just make sure you're not on mute. Hi.
How are you? I have a question about, so I have a child in middle school. Can you hear me?
No.
Not very well.
Kind of hard to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, there we go. Okay. So I have a child who's in the middle school and a freshman going into the high school. And my question is concerning what happens, and I apologize if you've already addressed it, but what happens if we have the first case of COVID in the high school, or if there's a case of COVID in the middle school and both of my children are sharing a bus?
Yeah.
Has that been have we thought about that? I mean, I apologize if you've already mentioned it.
No, that's a great question. And actually it's one, the Department of Health is putting out what they're calling a school playbook. It isn't done yet, but they've told us that we can use the child care playbook as sort of a lens of what they're going to be submitting to us. They said there's 10,000 students right now in childcare, and they've been using that playbook to sort of think about how it's going, lessons learned. Actually, we're hearing it's going very well. So the way that they explain, as I know it right now, is that one, if anyone gets diagnosed with COVID, a student or a staff member, that the Department of Health has a liaison that will work directly with us, so that we won't be deciding something. It's similar to, you know, how you get that letter from if child has lice or whooping cough, there's criteria. They're creating sort of that criteria, and then they're going to tell us based on our tracking. So those are the purpose of the pods, for us to trace back, you know, who made contact with who. What they're saying, typically they ask, how long have you been in contact? Was it longer than 15 minutes? Did everybody have a mask on? Were they 6 feet apart at all times? And then you provide that reporting. But right now, if you go to the child care playbook, it is in our FAQ as a resource. It sort of lays out what they're doing in childcare, and they're telling us that that would probably be similar unless there's minor revisions based on what they've learned. Okay.
Thank you. I put myself back on mute, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Kimberly Thorpe.
Hi, good evening. I had two questions. The first is, has a final decision been made on whether they're going to offer band and chorus courses this year? And second, I know there's been a lot of guidance on sports, and they've actually gotten back to sports teams are practicing. But what about the other extracurricular activities? The kids are really craving to get back to as normal as possible. Are the groups and clubs and things under consideration for being back, if we're allowed to be back in person?
They are. I would, in some ways you can kind of group extracurricular activities with athletics in terms of thinking about what we're going to do. I think the fact that some of the extracurriculars are something that happens internally within our own groups in the high school that don't have an extracurricular connection to working with other school communities in some ways make them more sustainable. Speaking to chorus and band in particular, there's some very stringent guidance surrounding performance, including singing and wind instruments in particular. And that's going to make it very daunting for those two programs to look like they normally do. However, I've talked to Ms. Dowding and said to her, she can provide me with evidence of her ability to work within the guidelines as it relates to that course, whether that means that students are only singing outside of the school classroom or that they're spread out on the football field and singing in some socially distanced way 14 feet apart. I'm willing to listen. So, with each instructional practice, and those are two in particular that offer very specific guidelines and challenges for how they're going to implement their curriculum. I need to hear that there's potential for them to do that, whether it's during school day when the weather's nice or when the school day is not. And that means a default back to things like music theory or thinking about how it is. Maybe it's almost like an inverted, like a flipped classroom where the students are doing a lot of performance practice outside of school and coming back in and talking about what it works like or not. And I've told Ms. Dowding that I'm still willing to listen to how she can make that happen. Band is something that is really under consideration. We're looking for our band teacher right now. The existing band teacher has gone to the high school or to the middle school, and we've got a posting right now, so we haven't hired that person yet. And part of that interview process would be, tell me how you can implement band given the restrictions. So I'm not willing to surrender on it now. I would say band might be a little more fragile than chorus, but I'm looking for guidance from the people that are going to be teaching those classes on how they can show me that they can meet the very stringent guidelines for implementation of those classes.
Okay, thank you.
Philip.
Hi, thank you. I apologize if this has already been asked, but can you tell me so far as of this evening what the ratio of who's picked virtual versus who's picked in-school learning?
Are you talking about the high school or as a district?
The high school.
I think we're about 190.
Correct. Have picked distance learning.
I think you cut out there. Say it one more time.
I'm sorry.
190 students at this point have selected distance learning as the option.
How many kids in the high school?
1,155, I think, right now.
So a very small group so far has picked virtual.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That was all I had.
Thank you. Tracy?
Hi. Can you hear me?
You're a little broken up, Tracy. Maybe sometimes is your video on? Sometimes if you shut it down, but it sounds robotic.
I was going to say melodic.
That sounds nicer. Mm.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I have a few questions. I'm sorry? Hello?
Yep, go ahead.
I can't hear you. It sounds like masks are not required full time. Am I correct in that?
So it's like It sounds like your question is specific to masking in the school environment. Is that correct?
Hello?
Masks are required for everyone at all times unless there's a mask break. Oh, you're freezing.
I'm gonna ask you to send your email your question directly to me, and I'll try to address it if I
Yes.
can't during the meeting.
So my question is, can you hear me now?
No.
Go ahead.
Okay. Hold on.
Tracy, if you can email us your question, we can get it back to you. We just want to make sure because we are breaking up. Sorry.
Okay, I have 3 questions.
Oh, that's fine. Email them. But that was weird.
I have 3 questions, and I will send those questions to you. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Actually, if your video's off, it was better. Erin Manny.
Okay, that's fine. That's okay. Thank you.
Hi, I have 2 questions to ask you. One, I'm a first responder who's been quarantined twice. In the event we send our kids to school and I find myself having to be quarantined again, how does this affect the kids?
So in the phase where someone from your family or someone you live with gets COVID, that's something that we have not received additional guidance on. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm not sure if you were on earlier when I had mentioned the kinds of things that the CDC say and the Department of Health take into consideration. Basically, what they would do is we would provide, we would give them what we know. They would do sort of the back mapping, the tracing, and they're giving us a liaison to work side by side. So Mr. Mckenzie or myself or any administrator in the district would not be determining the next steps. That would come directly from the Department of Health.
Okay. My second question would be if I decide to do distance learning and then the governor switches to 50% at our next meeting, can I switch to 50% before the school starts?
We're asking that families not do that, either you stick with what the governor determines based on whatever phase she determines, or you go directly to distance learning for the quarter. If it's high school and elementary, it's for the trimester. It just provides us with the ability to allow teachers to plan, as you can imagine, schedules, class rosters, classroom environments. If we create a pod to ensure that we have so much spacing, and then we start to fluctuate, or we create classes in a way that it makes it very difficult. While we know things come up a little at a time, we're asking that everyone really try their best, just like we are, right? We're all doing our best to try to make a decision. We realize it's not easy, but it really impacts how we're going to plan.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. Shimoni Mosa Simone.
All right, I have a few questions, so bear with me. First of all, I was just wondering, is there a Chinese teacher for this year?
We've interviewed a Chinese teacher, and we're really hopeful we can secure her. And, you know, obviously, you know, we've invested a ton in developing that program. We want to make it happen. It's one of those programs you can't just throw a substitute into, though. You know, I've done my darnest to try to learn Mandarin Chinese myself, and it's daunting. So we need an instructor. We're working feverishly. We feel like we have one particular candidate right now. We need to lock her up, and if not, we'll continue to search, hopefully that we can make that happen.
Great. I have 2 kids that both love Chinese class. They've had a wonderful time the last few years, so I would love for them to be able to continue with that.
Agreed.
Second question was just, what is hot lunch going to look like? Is it like a grab and go kind of thing?
Yep. All lunches are going to be grab and go. All breakfasts are going to be grab and go.
Okay. Couple quick questions. I'm sorry. If they're absent and they're unable to attend school, even virtually, are they still going to be required to have medical notes?
So I think it's only if it's for consistent amount of days, but I will get additional, we're going to get that clarification because I know everyone's really anxious about like why somebody would be out sick. So what I can do is get that and then make sure I place that in the FAQ.
Okay.
Good question.
We're also waiting from the state for guidance on attendance policies. They're supposed to share a model policy with districts. So that's something else that we're working on.
Okay, thank you. And then just a last question. With the school shootings and stuff that have happened in the past, all outside doors had to be locked and closed. And now they're going to need to, watching the flow, some places they're going to have to leave the building and enter. Are those going to be manned by teachers?
Yes, so our teachers are teaching assistants. One of the protocols, I'll just talk directly about what my proposal is for, especially in the front of the school, because we're using that passage from T hallway, walking across the parking lot to the front door to mitigate risk in traffic flow. I'm gonna have my SRO, when he's on campus, stationed right there with his police vehicle in the parking lot, mitigating any safety concerns. And again, there's not going to be any flow from one door outside to another that isn't supervised at doors, and those doors will be, it will be visible so that we can make sure that we can see students moving efficiently. But again, this is one of those things that we absolutely need the support of students as well. Walking from class, although it represents to another class, and having the opportunity to move outdoors comes with some responsibility and to move efficiently and effectively, again, to ensure that we mitigate any risk at all, whether it be school safety or health and safety issues. And that's something that we'll message to the students as well. But all those movements that you see arrowed that represent going outside are monitored movements where there'll be people at each door, letting people out and letting people in.
Okay, and they'll make sure that they're following the flow that you're doing as well, not trying to mitigate and go around.
Correct. And I was a high school student once too, and I've been doing this for a while, so I understand.
Not my kids.
High school nobody on this kids would do anything like that. You know, so again, those are things that our message to our students is, let's work collaboratively to make sure that we can stay and sustain our in-school time as much as possible, because we all miss it. Like, it just crushes us administratively that we haven't seen kids or our colleagues in the building, and we want to be able to do this for the full year at whatever level we're allowed to do it.
All right, last question. I know there's a bunch of them, I'm sorry. The last one is just, I know that for a lot of the guidance from the state has been to keep ventilation, windows open, doors, fans, that kind of stuff. What has been done at the school to allow for ventilation for the movement of air and stuff?
So we have guidance from the fire chief that early anyway, that said that we were allowed to keep interior doors open for airflow. We're not allowed to keep exterior doors, and a lot of our doors, our rooms at the high school have exterior egress doors. We're not allowed to keep those open, but we can keep windows open. So those are all screened. They allow for airflow as much as possible. So.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we have 4 questions left. We'll do those 4, and then we're going to wrap it up. And then we do have another forum next week. I just want to remind everybody there are additional opportunities. They're not the only ways to get your questions. So please feel free to email anything you may have if you didn't have a chance to raise your hand tonight. So we have Peggy's iPad.
Hi, so I'm interested in flipping it from the academic to the social and emotional side that's missing as we've experienced this COVID experience. And I'm wondering what your deans and what you're taking into consideration to put in place as it relates to virtual activities, virtual engagement that could allow for the students to feel a sense of belonging and a sense of engagement, because even as they navigate the pods, it's going to be difficult, and especially for more introverted students. So I was wondering, have you thought that through? Is there a playbook on that yet?
I think that was something that was voiced loud and clear in the community during the spring, in particular, when students, I would say faculty alike, but just thinking specifically about students were looking for ways to be connected, and we're working with our support personnel to try to be creative and thinking about how we can create groups. And I mean, I call them like accountabilities. I've been using this term accountability partner as it relates to academics, but creating groups of people that work collaboratively to help each other feel connected. I'll just give a really specific example of something that we piloted last fall and spring, and that we've implemented in full this year that I think we can work off of, and that's our peer mentoring program. So we've got 53 juniors and seniors that we trained over the course of this summer to be peer mentors. That training was virtual. Again, not ideal. There's so much more that we could do in terms of modeling and scenario work when we're live. But each of those 53 juniors and senior student leaders, and they were leaders that are identified by our teachers, administrators, coaches as student leaders, have been given a pod of anywhere from 2 or 3 to 5 or 6 freshmen. And they're going to stay with that pod all year, make connections with them, whether we're in live or distance learning, help them understand what it is to be a Charger, help them navigate distance and live learning. We've also done some work and we're continuing to do work in our freshman advisory, and we've got some plans for that this year, and really explicitly training students to academic skills and dispositions, not assuming that kids come in with executive function strategies or study strategies specific to different programs, or challenging students to take a little leap of faith and try to get involved in one of the many extracurricular activities, whether it be athletics, the CHARIHO Theater Company, Interact, our service learning branch, school government or class government, or any of the clubs that we offer. And we are going to be putting out a virtual extracurricular fair, so to speak, using Flipgrid kind of as our structure. Again, not ideal. We used to send, in our new student orientation, we'd send the entire freshman class a couple of days before school on tours of the campus and take them through the cafeteria where student leaders in all of our clubs would present to them opportunities to engage in those. But our goal is to try to get all of our students as connected as possible. I think we're very fortunate with our Career and Technical Center programs that those are really families that work through their school experience together. Each grade level, starting with the freshmen, get to know each other and then move up. They've got that core CTC teacher each year, and we're going to create some mentoring relationships between the upperclassmen and lowerclassmen within those CTC programs too. Again, to help them navigate live and distance learning and help them feel as connected as possible. I think this is something that we do well as a school community, if only because 20% of our students come from sending schools. So we're constantly aware and thinking about how we can introduce and engage students to our school community. But there's no question that thinking about how it is that we can create experiences for students. And I'll say we had a couple of opportunities that we didn't take advantage of in the spring that we're really going to be looking for those opportunities to help students feel as engaged as possible, whatever the circumstances, whether they're in distance learning or if they're in live.
Just as a quick follow-up, what do you think the odds are that we'll actually have a robotics team that would be able to participate in something like robotics?
You're talking about one of the great examples from last year. Mr. Bridgham did an amazing job with that group. I think they work so well collaboratively. I think one of the concerns about that program in particular is there's a lot of hands-on and a lot of shared materials. And I'm going to be talking with Ms. Scanapieko, our STEM coordinator, and with Mr. Bridgham, who I believe is committed to continuing to work with that program to think about how we can kit out some of the resources that we have so kids can continue to work on things like that, with the hope that we can get to a place where in the spring we are able to compete, because it was one of the great success stories in terms of students from across all kinds of social groups in our school coming together, really invested in something that they felt strongly about. I don't want to surrender any of our extracurricular activities. They're at the heart of who we are. And we know, I don't have any illusions that so many of our kids really come to school and are engaged in learning because of their commitment to their extracurricular participation. We want to sustain that as much as possible. So again, just like as I mentioned with chorus and band earlier, I'm challenging the people who run those programs to present to me how they can make it work in the context of the restrictions that have been provided given the pandemic.
Samantha?
Thank you. It's actually a follow-up question for Mr. Mckenzie, following up on Mr. Simmington's question in regards to the distance learning, Mr. Mckenzie. I wasn't so clear if what you meant was that children, students that choose distance learning, that they would have to log on to the Google Meet at the beginning of the block and be connected and then wait there for the teacher to engage. Would you mind clarifying that, please?
Yeah, and I'm gonna clarify it by probably not providing as much clarity, because I think it's gonna be a little bit different in every instructional discipline. But our teachers have talked about strategies for how it is that they can engage students. You remember when we were in distance learning, students were required to log on at the beginning of the assigned block, take a look at what the agenda is. There was some communication with the teacher. It could be that a teacher opens up a Meet and communicates in the moment with the students on the Meet and the students live to provide kind of an overview of the day, and sends them off to either small group or individualized tasks, and does check-ins where maybe they dedicate some of the instructional time, 20 or 30 minutes specifically to the students who are live, and then they dedicate some of the time instructionally to the students who are in distance learning. And I leave that to the teachers to think about, given their discipline, how that's going to work best. But our commitment is to try to provide students a sense, who are in distance learning, a sense of connectivity to what's happening in live learning, knowing that the students who are in distance learning on the whole are probably not going to receive the same experience as those who are live, alternating distance and back. I think the students who are in alternating in like the 50-50 scenario, they know that in a couple of days they're going to be in the classroom and the other students are going to be live. So I think it does present some challenges in terms of, I'll be really candid, in terms of scope and sequence. We've asked our teachers, again, to think about sustainability. We might not be able to provide for all the students, either live or in distance, the same breadth and depth of instruction that we would provide if we were all in the school community together. So it might demand that we really have to focus on power standards or essential learnings in each one of the units of study, and be creative in thinking about how it is that in those units of studies we can engage students in distance learning and allow for engagement and collaboration in students who are live. And I think the commitment is there from our teachers in our discussions with them, and they've been a part of our planning the whole time, is this notion that during the instructional blocks, they're going to try as much as possible to balance instructional attention for those who are live and those who are distant.
Thank you. So
I just wanted to add on there, because I think this connects to your question, is what we had found out in the spring was, based on our work this past spring, was that we needed to set really clear criteria for attendance. We got that feedback from parents, teachers, and students. And so that is why that 15-minute first kickoff of the block is really important, that teachers are expected to take attendance daily for each block in using PowerSchool. They take it during the first 15 minutes. And the language we're using is that attendance can be confirmed by the student showing they're live with the class at the start of the block. And it might not always be a Google Meet. It's going to be dependent on the way the classroom teacher structures his or her course. But they need to check in on Google Meet. Maybe it's through the Canvas discussion platform. Maybe they're present on a live Google Doc, or they sign into a live attendance sheet. So we just wanted to, one, give those real specific criteria around attendance so that it's really clear. And two, just make sure that we capture the different ways that students can show live attendance.
And I would just say, given what we just described, that I'm really asking all of our parent and student community to have some grace for the challenge that our teachers are taking on in terms of trying to manage distance and live learning at the same time. It's a daunting task. Our teachers are committed to providing quality instruction. I'm sure there's going to be times when in distance learning, it's not going to feel like they have the same experience as students who are in live learning, and maybe vice versa as well. But their commitment is to try to ensure that individual students get a quality education given the circumstances that we're in, and that it's a sustainable experience that we can provide.
I appreciate the answers, and I would say I have no doubt about that, Mr. Mckenzie and Ms. Paz, because even though we all know that the distance learning wasn't exactly the same as in person, our experience, our family's experience was that the teachers were outstanding and they did the best they could to try to emulate that. So from our perspective, it actually worked well. Not the same, but well. And then just one final comment, would it be accurate to expect then that regardless of how the teachers decide to structure their own, their own blocks, that with distance learning, the student will receive some direct instruction on new concepts?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
And again, I'm going to leave it to my teachers to be creative about how they approach that. I could imagine that teachers potentially could record some direct instruction and provide that virtually, and then follow up with questions about it in the same way they would if they were going to give it in some sort of a live stream. That live stream is an option that we're not going to be providing, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to connect directly at some point in time with the students who are in distance learning. And again, I think one of the things that I feel so great about in terms of our school community, we're 8 years invested in our one-to-one initiative. We've got a great learning management system in Canvas that allows for some really creative communication. And going back to the professional development that we've had, our professional development has been internal capacity building. We've got amazing people who have embraced instructional technology, and they're eager to share it with each other. They go outside. We've got young teachers who've created unbelievable consortiums of young teachers in Rhode Island. They're leaders in trying to bring people together to institute best practices in high school. And we are humbled as administrators every day by what teachers bring to the table in terms of new practices. So I would say, again, I ask for grace in the very challenging circumstance, but I'm always excited to be wowed by the new ways that teachers come up with to keep students engaged, whether in distance or live learning.
We're confident that you guys will do a great job no matter what. And just one final question.
Sure.
So what will virtual high school look like in virtual, format if you choose distance learning?
I think it'll look very similar to what it looked like in the spring in terms of students being expected to go log in to Canvas at the same time that the live students are asked to log in, that there's going to be a normed expectation about the information that's provided and resources that are provided on Canvas on the teacher agenda, that the teacher will be providing instructional attention to the distance learning students at time during the instructional block, and that there's going to be the opportunity for support after school, even though it's virtual support. So your student struggling with a concept that was introduced in class today, the student reaches out to the teachers, can we connect after school on this? That's no different than a student staying after and saying, hey, I really don't understand this concept. Students disengaged in distance learning, and the teacher's instructing some concepts and doesn't feel confident that the student understands those concepts, they can mandate academic support and have that student come set up a meet, or at least some sort of a communication on a Google Doc or what have you, where the teacher reviews what it is they expect of the student and make sure that they understand those concepts. So very similar to what we do live. It's just, and in some ways there's incredible flexibility that comes with meets. Like this format is so frustrating for me because I'm energized by groups of people coming together. And I feel great about our experience tonight in terms of the questions that everybody's asking. But in terms of flexibility, this allows for so much more shared participation and collaboration in some ways, because we get to hear and everybody gets to participate, whether passively or actively, in kind of shaping what it is that we're doing. So there's a convenience related to Meet that I think is helpful for all of us as it relates to support.
Thank you.
Thank you. Erin Goodman.
Hi, thank you very much. I just have a quick question, and I just don't want to ask it without first saying a huge thank you to everyone on staff and administration. So thorough and so helpful, and just feels really thoughtful. So thank you very much for that. Can you, I know you couldn't go up, but based on if the governor's recommending full in-person learning, and for whatever reason it's just not working in Chariho, as a district, do you have the ability to say, we're going to go to a 50-50 model or something else? Can you go lower than what the governor's allowing if it's a better choice that you think?
That's a very good question. And the interesting thing about that is there's no flexibility with elementary school. She's very clear that pre-K through 5 must be full in person during partial and full in-person learning. However, for example, right now in Chariho, we have a transportation conundrum where right, trying to figure out how to get all our middle school and high school students to school on busing. And if we don't get our numbers lower, or we, we can't figure out a way to get our proposal through Department of Health, and not just our proposal, but the state's proposal throughout every district to increase the number of busing, and by the way, safely. So for example, they've said we can put 2 children in a seat if they are from the same household. So the question was asked by teachers that said, well, if they're in the same household, can't they be in the same pod? What if they're in the same pod, if they're going to be together anyway during the day? So lots of great feedback. So we presented a proposal. So like you may be able to do 3 in a seat if they're all from the same family and they're all siblings. But at minimum, we would like to see 2. So that proposal is being reviewed by the Department of Health, the CDC, the governor's office, RIDE. They've called in the National Guard, RIPTA. So they've never put children on a bus, right? They don't do what we do as educators. They think about public transportation and not the way school buses work. So, but if we don't come to a number where I can get all the students to school and, parents can't drop off and we have an issue, the governor is saying, tell us why. Like if we can't do those metrics, when you might have heard her Wednesday say, now it's up to the districts. They need to get this going. And I can promise you, everybody in CHARIHO is putting their heads together. The bus office is working every day. I'm giving her new information and parents are opting out. So we're able to clean up those lists, but only if there's a rationale. We would have to explain why we're unable to make a metric. Okay. We have last 2, Valerie Bertolozzi.
Hi, yeah, I have a question that came up after listening to the first responder who talked about being in quarantine. It also made me think of this. I mean, we had a situation where my youngest child spiked a fever. Normally you wouldn't worry about it, but now it's like, oh, call the pediatrician and yep, get a COVID test. Technically, no one else in the household needed to isolate or quarantine because they didn't have known contact with someone with COVID. But ethically, we all called out of work and canceled all of anything that we might have had. So what are the guidelines if a person in the family has the sniffles, has a sore throat, has a fever? Does everyone else supposed to stay home from school?
So that's a great question. I don't pretend to know all of that. The medical questions they're waiting on. The child care playbook gives some guidance around if family members, and they've told us we can look for that for some references, but what they're saying is they're revising for the school playbook. But I'm going to note your question. A lot of the questions I've already written down and provided some follow-up that I need to get. That's being one of them. I live with my mother. She lives with me. She's high risk. She has all the criteria. Both of my kids who are teenagers had to work, as well as my husband and myself, through the pandemic. So we had to be really careful with her. And I had a cough earlier in March, so it was difficult. And great question. And what I'll do is as soon as I get that response back from the Department of Health, I will update our FAQ. What I've been doing on the FAQ is now I put the date below it so you know that that's new information.
Thank you. One more quick question. You mentioned several times that there's no live streaming, but then you also mentioned that maybe distance learning people would be checking in with Google Meet. Wouldn't that be a live stream essentially?
So live streaming is a little bit different. And I think sometimes it's just the semantics of it. Typically when you say live stream, it means like the camera's on all day and like a feed all day that you could go in and watch. Where what we're saying is that we're working with our teachers being thoughtful about more direct live instruction, because there may be opportunities where they're going outside and there is no camera outside. So the teachers are going to be really mindful and thoughtful about when that live instruction is taking place. Think of it more like group work. So if I'm a teacher and I set up my classroom with grouping and I would rotate those groups with direct instruction, that virtual group may be one of those rotations. As an example.
I like that example.
Okay, Phyllis Penhalo is our last question of the night.
Okay, I'll try to make a good one. Just 2 things. One's an anecdote on one of the parents named Brian, which I don't see his name here, so he must be gone. But my son was drifting last semester, and I just want to assure him that the teachers were on it. Once I figured it out, and you just know his guidance counselor, his what do you call that class? The, where you,
Advisory.
Student support system.
Thank you. Advisory. Everybody was on it. It was great. So I just want to make that comment that not to worry about that because Chariho teachers and everyone will be on it. And then the second I was going to say, this might not be an answer to this, but this is something I'm seeing because I work with students, not at Chariho, but I work with students. What the students are saying is that it's so great that teachers are creative and doing things differently because you don't want every teacher doing the same thing, right? That would just be boring. And I love that you're giving that creativity. However, the other side of this, and I want to know if you're talking about this, is some of the students, like some teachers were doing such different things that they were confused. And then the deadlines are watching videos. And I don't know how you can ever control this, but sometimes there was 5 videos to watch the night before, or the deadlines were Monday, Tuesday, how could you ever get the teachers together?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's, Craig, let me start with that one. I think sometimes it's difficult. Let's say we were all in person. I don't think we'd ever get all of the teachers on the same page to say that these are the due dates and these are the must-haves and the things that you have to avoid. So there, that's a constant struggle that we work with. And when we move to distance learning, I can tell you, we met a lot more on that subject. We talked to parents and teachers and students, and we had a lot of department time allocated to that issue. Andrea and I and Craig, we learned real quickly that when we had those professional development days in the spring, that was a great time for our departments to get together and answer those exact questions that you brought up. What's acceptable for attendance? We had to start with basic, how should we be taking attendance as a department and as a school? Then we progressed into what should our assignments look like? What should the amount of screen time look like? How long are we going to be instructing the kids if it's a 90-minute block? Are we going to be going for a 20-minute direct instruction or 45? Or we found out we had teachers that maybe incorrectly thought that they should be instructing for 90 straight minutes on the screen. So these are all things that were, I don't want to use the term fleshed out throughout the spring, but there's a lot that we learned through the spring. Can we learn more? Yeah, we can definitely learn more. And I think that's what those professional development days allow us to do. We've had a lot of time to talk. I know my wife is I talk about her all the time. She's in the math department here at the high school, and she had a meeting with her Algebra 2 cohort today to talk about how they're going to be instructing Algebra 2 for the first semester. So there is a lot of planning going on behind the scenes that probably Craig, Andrea, and I don't even know about with the department. So and it's kind of a long-winded way to answer your question, but it is we're always mindful about what we should be providing as deliverables if we're in the school or if we're going to be through distance learning.
And just to add on to that, what we did make sure was that teachers are consistent with the following things. For every lesson, they are going to communicate the agenda, the class resources, the product and goal for each lesson, and they're going to have those clear deadlines and due dates and times as well. So that's just an expectation that we do have that they are consistent with and moving forward. But like Jerry said, as we are in say it was a typical school year, there are different variables for different deadlines and different types of assignments that are provided.
So I think while we all know the challenges COVID is bringing to all of us, I also think there's opportunity in that challenge. And I think we've talked about some of them tonight. The virtual forum, maybe we wouldn't have 139 parents logging in. Maybe we would have had more, who knows? But I think what we want to think about is the fact that we're actually doing, and I said this earlier for those of you, either I did today or maybe it was Richmond. I'm kind of now I have to remember. But basically, we tell our kids all the time that you're going to make mistakes. You're going to learn from those mistakes. You're going to improve. We're all embarking on action research right in front of our kids, and our children are getting the benefit of that. And I think it's great that they're seeing us as adults really take on this challenge right in front of them. And then we have always said to our students, feedback is important. And they're finally, I think, really seeing that that's really true and that they're advocating for themselves even more than they have in the past. And my kids as well. I mean, I have a 10-year-old, an 18-year-old, a 19-year-old, and my son for the first time said, the professor actually listened. And he changed when I told him what I liked and what was a struggle. I said, absolutely, this is new. Teachers, they're even more tuned in than ever because they're very vulnerable right now. And it's not an easy place to be. But what I can promise is we'll all make mistakes. I can promise we won't get it all right. But I can also promise that we're going to take the feedback, learn, and get better. And if you all can do that with us, and we can all join in and make sure that we do it together, I think it's going to be great. I mean, the administrators, the teachers, the families in Charo have been so welcoming. But I know, I guarantee, I sometimes email back and I'm like, oh, I get it. I'm a parent. You know, sometimes we're vague because we don't have all the answers, and I know you all know that. But, you know, it's fine for you to say, and a lot of you do. I know you don't know this. I know you probably had 100 questions, but we're okay getting 100 questions. We all know what we signed up for. We're well aware of what this is. And it's probably not going to get easier, especially as we move down this path. But bear with us and know that every email, every phone call, and if we need to do more virtual forums, we'll do them. Like we're in this together, and we want to know that your child's success is important to you, and it's very important to us. And whatever we have to do to make it better, you can count on us. And I know that my short time here in Chariho, I feel blessed. The community has really wrapped its arms around myself, and the administrators and the teachers and the staff and the families have been very supportive. So thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. And don't stop asking your questions. Don't worry. Even if you thought you've asked it 10 times, ask it 11 if it makes you feel better. Everyone have a good night. Thank you.
Night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.